Billy here with Gilbert Travels, welcoming you to the pilot episode of my new series, Wings, Rails, and Waves of Washington State. So transportation here in Washington State is unique, as for one thing, this area was developed during the Western Gold Rush type era and the golden age of trains. So you have a strong legacy of rail in this area, which tied together into ports for trade into the Pacific, and of course, a huge aviation history, including the founding of Boeing. Geographically, Washington is also unique, with a populated core of Western Washington located around the Puget Sound, which can reach depths of over 900 feet, making traditional bridge and road-based travel between many points difficult or impossible. Add in the Cascades and Olympic mountain ranges, and the landscape of Washington makes for some seriously unique transportation scenarios. Together, those are the factors that inspired this series. So this is going to be the first segment of our pilot episode here of the show. And today we're going to be discussing Delta Airlines, the second largest airline currently serving the Washington State, Seattle area. Delta actually has a history here at Seattle going back to 1933, where they were flying a Hamilton H-47 propeller aircraft between Tacoma, Seattle, Wenatchee, and Spokane. They also merged later with Northwest Airlines, which is actually was a Minnesota-based airline, but had service to Tokyo right here from Seattle going back to 1947. They've inherited by their merger with Northwest, which announced in 2008, a giant global network here in Seattle, including Trans-Pacific and Transatlantic routes. But today we're going to be talking about their smaller connection service with SkyWest, which serves their closer in destinations with a mix of CRJ and Embraer aircraft. Today we're going to be on an E-175 SC, that stands for Special Configuration. This is the replacement for the E-170, which first entered service in 2004 and has since been discontinued. So these are now 70-seat configuration of the E-175, 6 less seats than this airplane typically holds with Delta. It allows them to meet their contracts with their pilots called scope clauses, which limit the number of seats that can be on board the planes. So these planes first entered service in 2018, and indeed this plane was delivered to Delta in June of that month. So it should be a pretty nice new airplane. So today's flight to Portland, Oregon is the second shortest route served by Delta Connection. The shortest route is actually up to Vancouver, which beats it by just 2 miles. Today's flight is going to be 129 miles. The flight to Vancouver is 127. Delta Connection also operates some longer routes. The longest route out of this airport with an Embraer aircraft is down to Ontario, California, which comes in at 956 miles. So this flight today down to Portland is blocked out at about an hour, but it looks like historically it's about 30 minutes in the air and reaches just a maximum altitude of about 17,000 feet. Okay, so today's first class seat, pretty basic. Literature pouch, some extra stuff here. Pull out, not even a pull-out table in here, that's interesting. Never seen that before. On that side. Huh, that's interesting. A slide-out drink holder in the center.
To comply with crew instructions, posted placards, and light information signs.
Once we're just a short 30 minutes.
Okay. Oh, okay. Upgrade yourself like that. Okay?
Cruise altitude 17,000 feet. Latest reported weather there at the airport in Portland. Winds are from the southwest right now at less than 10 miles an hour. Good visibility there with just some scatter clouds. And current temperature about 52 degrees. However, it does look like possibility of some scattered rain showers moving through the Portland area today as well. Forecast a little bit later on this afternoon. As far as the en route portion, likely just a little bit choppy today. with this weather system moving through here. We'll do our best to keep it as smooth as possible for you, but probably in for just a few bumps as we make our way down to Portland today. But once again, we certainly do appreciate you choosing to fly Delta today, and welcome aboard.
In the air, taking our short cruise down here to Portland. First class flight attendant did take drink pre-orders on the ground, so I'm going to get a cup of coffee here in a minute to enjoy while we look at these views on our relatively low altitude cruise down to Portland. So we're at our cruising altitude here today, about 20 minutes to touchdown. Enjoying sipping my coffee here. My free upgrade to first class. It's a Delta Silver Medallion member. So as I've expressed before, I love the Embraer, love the E-Jet. Well, I was actually a little bit bummed almost to get upgraded on this flight and end up here on the right side of the aircraft, since on that clear day you'd have beautiful views of Mount Rainier and Mount Hood on the left side coming here south, but ended up being cloudy today anyway, so it doesn't look like I missed out on much. And a nice comfy seat here for this very short ride on down to Portland.
On behalf of my flight team, we would like to thank you for choosing Delta Airlines. We'll be on the ground shortly.
Of Delta SkyWest and the Seattle-based flight crew, thank you for continuing to wear your mask or face covering over your nose and mouth, keeping us all safe. We've enjoyed having you on board, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a great rest of your day here in Portland or wherever your travels may take you.
All right, well, that was a pretty painless flight down here to Oregon in this E-175. Hope you enjoyed that little flight with SkyWest today. We're going to skip forward to tomorrow morning as we head on over to Amtrak. Billy here with Gilbert Travels, here at Portland Union Station for the second segment of my new program on planes, trains, and ferries of Washington State, wings, rails, and waves. So we're here this morning. We're going to get on the Amtrak Cascades from here in Portland. It's about 3.5 hours back up to Seattle. Beautiful train station here to start the morning off. If you were with us for the first segment, we came down here yesterday with Delta on an E-175. So this is going to be the second part of our journey for this series. So passenger service here between these two cities of Portland and Seattle dates back to 1925, when a combination of 3 private railroads, the Northern Pacific, Great Northern, and Union Pacific, served these cities. That lasted through 1970, when with the creation of Amtrak in 1971, they centralized the service between these cities. At the time, they started 3 daily round trips, plus one that went all the way to San Diego. Several train sets have operated this route over the years, and in 1998, they were consolidated officially under what is today still the Amtrak Cascades brand. Total length of this train from Eugene, Oregon, all the way to Vancouver, BC, is 467 miles. Today we're going to be on the most traveled part of the route, right here from Portland to Seattle. At the moment, the trains that were operating this route most commonly, the Talgo 6 series, were retired because of COVID in 2020 and an accident they had back in 2017. They're currently operating this route with leased equipment from Amtrak, with new trains expected to be delivered at some point in the future.
In stations up north, train 500, boarding gate 5.
advanced seat assignments were not available, and since many riders were already on board from the previous southern stops in Oregon, we had to search for a bit to find a place to sit. These Amtrak Horizon economy cars have seating configured in a 2x2 configuration, switching in opposing directions halfway through the car, meaning some will always be facing rear. Above the seats, there's an open area for the storage of carry-on size bags, and the seats themselves are not too different from a typical airline seat. Once the conductor checks your ticket, he does provide a paper slip that sits overhead of your seat to mark it as filled. If you do decide to change seats later, make sure to move this card with you. Alright, made it on the train. Have a look around here. Pretty simple, do you have plugs right here? Tray table. And we're rolling back up towards Seattle. Okay, so I ended up rear facing here, but I switched over to this side of the train. It's supposed to have the better views once we get out by the river. Right away, as we pull out of Portland, we have an overwater bridge crossing the Willamette River, North Portland Harbor, and then the Columbia River. This waterway is the largest river in the Pacific Northwest, stretching 1,243 miles, or 2,000 kilometers, from Columbia Lake in Canada's British Columbia, down through Washington, finally forming part of the border between Oregon and Washington State. It is the fourth largest river by volume in the US, and its total drainage basin, including all the other rivers and tributaries that feed into it, cover an area the size of France. As we cross this vital economic and ecological waterway, we're about 100 miles from its terminus in the Pacific Ocean. We're now crossing the Columbia River. Midpoint of this bridge, we will re-enter Washington State and roll through Vancouver, Washington. The dining car is currently closed, so not my own breakfast. We then enter Vancouver, Washington, and make our first stop at the journey. We then follow the course of the much smaller Lake River, off to the western side of the train, which is an 11-mile tributary that runs parallel to the Columbia, which it then feeds into. While the Columbia loses 2,690 feet of elevation during its journey, the Lake River only travels 1 foot downhill during its course from Vancouver Lake to the Columbia. Next is a crossing over the Lewis River, another tributary of the Columbia, which as it so happens is not named after Lewis of the Lewis and Clark expedition, whereas the nearby Lewis County is named after that very explorer, whose journey involved passage on the Columbia as the party completed their journey to the Pacific in 1805. Amtrak travels on many private freight lines, and it's amazing how little has changed on how we travel US rails today. The history of the current use of the standard railroad gauge, 4 foot 8.5 inches, is used around the world and goes back likely for about 200 years of rail history. Although it does not stem from the wheelbase of a Roman chariot, as some have speculated, its history in the US does include a role in hampering the Confederacy during the Civil War, and it was adopted as the nationwide standard by June 1st of 1886. After a quick stop in Longview, Washington, we leave the Columbia behind and head inland. At the time of filming, the dining cars were still closed due to COVID precautions. However, an all-in-one snack pack and water were available for all passengers. service has since been restored to these dining carts on the Amtrak Cascades. What has still not returned to this legendary train, as of the time of this publication, is its full northern route from Seattle up to Vancouver, BC. This is expected to resume sometime in 2022, and it will relieve a temporary bus service that has been serving this route since the land borders reopened between the US and Canada. For now though, let's take in some scenes of rural central Washington, the types of views that are best seen by rail and easily taken in at the top speed of the Amtrak Cascades of only 79 miles per hour or 127 kilometers per hour. Now we come to our next stop in Centralia, Washington, where we're about halfway through today's journey. After leaving a period of rain behind us, we come to the South Puget Sound. This is one of the most special parts of today's journey that sadly you cannot experience yourself any longer. At the time of this filming in May of 2021, the train followed the tracks all the way around the Sound from around DuPont, Washington up towards Tacoma. This truly provides some spectacular views. However, it's a long route that involves the use of single-track tunnels and does not add any additional stops to the route, as well as creates conflict with freight lines. A shorter bypass route was developed and opened in December 18th of 2017. The inaugural use of that bypass resulted in disaster, as the train derailed, injuring 80 people on board the train and in cars, damaged as the train tumbled onto Interstate 5. There were 3 fatalities on that day, reported to be train enthusiasts, starting out that day excited to be on an inaugural route. So it's with a bit of a somber note that we enjoy these views, heading out to the tip of Tacoma's Point Defiance, under the Tacoma Narrows Suspension Bridge, famous in and of itself for collapsing into Puget Sound in 1940, just months after it was opened, during windy conditions. On November 18, 2021, service resumed for the Amtrak Cascades onto the Point Defiance bypass, avoiding these beautiful views and saving about 10 minutes off the average journey between Tacoma and Point South, as well as allowing for more additional service due to lack of conflict with the freight lines. I suppose in the long run, these trains are public transportation and not for rail tourism, so the time savings and additional times ran will get those who rely on this train where they need to be a little faster. I am for one glad to have been able to show this historical route to you in this video, and to remember the 3 rail fans who lost their lives in the pursuit of safer public transportation. As we entered into Tacoma Station, we passed the dual-level Amtrak Superliners of the Coast Starlight, which runs from Seattle all the way down to Los Angeles. The Coast Starlight was temporarily put out of its full service length by wildfires shortly after this filming last summer, but it's since gone to resume its full 35-hour journey down the US West Coast. That's about 10 times as long as my short journey today, so it is equipped with sleeper car service that the Amtrak Cascades lacks. After departing Tacoma, we did encounter some of the famous Amtrak delays, as congestion due to track refurbishment grounded us to a halt. After that though, we made a final stop in Tukwila, the last stop outside of Seattle, and passed by the Boeing Field on our way into the downtown area. On our way into Seattle's King Street Station, we passed the Sounder commuter train, which connects areas from below Tacoma and Lakewood up to Everett, the home of Boeing's primary assembly facility in Washington. I do hope to return to this train to try out its newer dedicated Trainset equipment, and once the journey can be made north to Canada. So we made it here to Seattle King Street Station about 40 minutes late, but we are now here. It's a beautiful train station, opened originally in 1906. The clock tower outside was inspired by the Campanile in Venice, Italy, and it has a very beautiful interior here in the main terminal. At one time there was a separate Union station built one block away, but when Amtrak consolidated services in 1971, everything came to this terminal. Commuter services for the local Sounder Transit were added in the year 2000, and the city has since purchased the station, and in 2013 it was refinished and rededicated, and it is in the National Register of Historic Places. Today, the station has 10 tracks over 4 platforms. It serves 3 separate Amtrak routes, including the Cascades we did today, as well as the Empire Builder out to Chicago, and the Coast Starlight down to LA. And I think at some point, if this series is a success, we'll try out some more of those trains, as well as the local Sounder Transit train. So Billy with Gilbert Travels here. This has been the second segment of my new series, and this was the Amtrak Cascades from Portland here to Seattle. If you're watching the larger episode, we'll be moving on next to our in-water segment, our ferry segment. Billy with Gilbert Travels here. Welcome back to Wings, Rails, and Waves of Washington State. We're here now at our third segment, the ferry segment of this first pilot episode. And today we're going to explore the Washington State ferry system and show you how to get on board with your vehicle. All right? Now, let's come along. Of the different ferry systems here in Washington State Ferries is of course the largest. It's also ran by the Washington Department of Transportation as part of their highway system, and it is the largest passenger ferry in the US, as well as the second largest automobile carrying ferry system in the world. It's been operated here in Washington State since 1951. Today, it's operating 21 ferries between 20 scheduled transport hubs here in the Puget Sound area. In 2016, this system carried over 24 million passengers. And when you consider that Washington State's total population is about 7.5 million, that goes to show you that these ferries see a lot of use. Today, we're going to take this route here from West Seattle over to Vashon Island. Vashon Island is a residential island comprising about 10,000 residents that's connected to the mainland only with 2 ferries, one here at the north end of the island, as well as a southern ferry that heads over to Tacoma. Since it is a residential island, there are many working people on the island, and they rely on this ferry every day to get here to the mainland for work. The ferry can be boarded by either passengers only and vehicles. If you're coming via vehicle, you stop at a toll booth here at the top and buy your ticket. On some of the more popular routes up in the San Juan Islands, they recommend reservations in advance. But on most of the locations, you can just drive off about 20 minutes ahead of time, buy your ticket, park and turn off your car right here in the waiting lane, and then when it's time to board, the attendants and the PA system will help you get on board and get your place. So once you're waiting and parked, you can wait in your vehicle, or you can come over here to the passenger terminal. Most of these transit hubs have a terminal area where passengers that are not coming with a vehicle can buy their tickets, as well as there's normally a little convenience type section, maybe some vending machines. So let's check out what the one here in Fauntleroy is like. Coffee machine, vending machine. So pretty small, pretty basic, but good spot to grab a quick drink or a snack on your way onto the ferry. For today, since we're just on a day trip, we bought a one-time use ticket. These tickets can also be bought in 10 ticket multi-packs for a discount, or in monthly use passes, which obviously would be very helpful if you're a resident of the island. Once you're on board the ferry, you just stop your vehicle and you can either choose to stay inside, or you can venture out into the ferry itself, into the passenger carrying area and out onto the upper decks to get some views. The very first time you do this, it can be a bit intimidating, but really the system's very well polished and there's not any way you can really screw it up, so it's a lot of fun. Today's route is serviced by an Issaquah class ferry, which is 328 feet long. These ferries can carry up to 1,200 passengers and up to 124 vehicles. There's 3 of them that operate this route. They were each built in the early 1980s. They each have 2 diesel engines, pushing out 5,000 total horsepower. Today's trip is one of the shorter ones in the Washington State Ferry system. It'll be about 20 minutes. Some of these routes can take over an hour, but today's going to be a nice little trip. It's beautiful weather. The hull on this Issaquah class ferry is symmetrical, with a rudder and propeller at each end. In the case of this ferry type, the propeller that's facing towards the direction of travel is capable of feathering, or turning so that the blades go with the movement of the water. Then they change back to provide thrust when that end of the ferry is going to be doing the pushing again, up to a cruising speed of 16 knots. This configuration prevents the ferry from ever needing to turn around during its many daily voyages, thus also allowing an easy on and off of all vehicles on board. All right, so this is the ferry as you saw inside there. Plenty of passenger seating. The cafe area is currently closed, but there's still vending machines. Upon notice to return to your vehicle, you simply get on board and then drive off, rejoining the local road system with ease. There's really nothing to it, and it could save at the very least hours off a trip around the Puget Sound, and connects islands like Vashon with road travel that would otherwise be unreachable. So as you can see, the state ferry system is a very unique and interesting way to get around the beautiful islands and beyond here of Washington State and the Puget Sound. Whether you just watch this one segment or the full episode of Wings, Rails, and Waves of Washington State, we'll have more of this content coming along later. If you enjoy this series, there's lots more planes, trains, and ferries here in the state for us to try out. Billy with Gilbert Travels here. Hope you enjoyed coming along, and we will see you on the next flight. I was really glad to be able to bring this show concept to life for my viewers. If you enjoyed today's video, please take a moment and hit that like button. Let me know what you thought by leaving a comment below. Share this video with a friend, and if you haven't already, please do hit that subscribe button and the bell so you can be made aware when more content is available. As always, thanks for watching.